Oh, landmines and jellyfish. Welcome back to Knives, I guess. And here's my impression of the doctor if you can't pay for having your kidney stones removed. Eh, eh, eh. Nurse, get a pencil. But hit that like button or Wilford Brimley will hide diabetes in your socks. And last night we did a live stream going in on the Vosti Mini Psyop. Oh, my Kershaw cards. So, let's take a look at what we're holding, because it'll bother you if I don't. And you know I love you. So, first things first and most importantly, the pocket clip is tip up, which is the Lord's carry. We have got the Norplex brand micarta, not sponsored. Get at me, Norplex. We have got the axis lock. We got the thumb studs. Let's flick the stud. And we got a bit under 3 inches of Elmax steel. Okay, so we did our live stream, and, before we did the live stream, I'd carried this for a week and had a great time with it. Even though the knife handle's a little bit small for hands my large, and it's not the most comfortable thing in the world, for a compact, small EDC knife that doesn't weigh a ton, it was really good. It was really good. The action's really good, and, I was not super comfortable with it trying to close it like this just because it feels like my hand's in the way, but was not a problem whatsoever. The centrifugal open's not the greatest, but you can do it. It's just the blade's lightweight, and it's not weighted for it, but it does work. I'll give that an okay out of 10. It was definitely snappy enough. Now, I will say one thing that was a little bit unexpected with the Cardboard Slayer session. I waxed this with Yocco's Mad Wax, and that wax moisturized my hand right here while we went. All right, this is normally all kinds of dried out and crusty looking just because I handle cardboard day in, day out. It moisturized it while I was working with it. It was unexpected, but I love that. It was just so interesting. So, Cardboard Slayer was a very interesting experience, and now Elmax is tied up with MagnaCut for my favorite steel we've tested so far. The MagnaCut was raw edge retention. When we did that, it held on forever with the new edge on it. Elmax is just all edge stability. All right, so let's take a look at our timeline of events, and we'll see what happened, because I wrote everything down like I do. So, we pulled a 348 on the edge sharpness tester that I'll show you in a little bit here. We pulled a 348 on that, which is really high for a factory edge. I'm not sure why it was like that, but it may have been just the obtuse angle on it, but, we stropped it. I figured there might be a bit of a burr, so we stropped it, and it went down to 263. That diamond emulsion put that work in, and I'm happy with how it's dropped down. So, when that normally happens, we don't get good edge retention or good edge wear on a knife when we start on Cardboard Slayer. This was no exception. It lasted about 30 minutes, and we pulled a 600 in the belly at the worst spot. So we stopped and we sharpened it, and we got it down to 138. We got it down to a really sharp edge. It did really good on the sharpening. We put it on the, the Work Sharp Precision Adjust Professional. Not sponsored. Get at me, Work Sharp. But, we sharpened it down to 138. And so we started with this thing, and over the course of 1 hour, all right, we pulled a 341 right up here towards the tip in the belly area, and then back farther in the belly where it was taking the biggest hits, a 352. That is significantly less edge wear than I'm used to seeing. Normally, we're up in the 400s after that first hour. All right, so we went for another hour, and we pulled a 422 back here in the belly, again, where it was taking the most hits, and then towards the tip, we pulled a 350. That's normally what we see after the first hour. Like, it did a really good job hanging on. So we went for another hour. We pulled a 363 back in the back belly. We pulled a 458 up in the belly. And towards the tip, we pulled a 537 where it was taking more hits. And again, those numbers will change because the way that tester works, if you move around a little bit, you're going to get different numbers. So we're trying to find the worst spot. And the worst spot we hit was a 537. After 3 hours, that's really good. Now, at the 4 hour mark, we hit the 428 back here, 514 back here, 507 right here. I could not find the spot where we had the 537, but it's still very, very stable. It held on very nicely. So we went for another hour, basically. We hit 5 hours, and we got a 414 back here, a 529 up in here, and a 561 up in here. So that 561, it had started cutting like trash intermittently, and it was starting to get bad. Now, we were 8 hours into that live stream, so I had to give up finally, but we could have gotten some more time out of it. How much, I'm not sure, but we could have gotten more time out of it. You know, and it's like, I was giving up, and there were other things popping up that we'll get into a bit later. But I mean, it did really good, and just the way we had that slope, the way it wore out was so nice. We'll get into that in a second too. But that factory edge did not like being force fed all the succulent cardboard meat I could give it. It crapped out in a god awful hurry. Now, this has been a common theme with the super steels we tested so far. Like, the edges are really obtuse, I guess, and they wear out like that, and they stop cutting worth of crap in the cardboard. As far as the parameters of this testing goes. Now, I'll add the disclaimer because someone will comment on it, mad about how we do things, but we keep track of the amount of time spent cutting. All right, you saw how many hours we were cutting, and it's a very consistent pace. You can go check. There are receipts. Take a look at the live stream to see what I'm talking about. We cannot count every individual cut over that long. And this is giving us a good way to compare the steels to each other in my testing. That's all we're looking for out of this. It's not the most scientific thing in the world. So I had to get that out of the way. That's how this works. But, it really, really did not like being fed that cardboard. And, we stopped and sharpened it. And that was a nicer experience than I expected. It went better, and it took a great edge. It went better than D2, and it took a great edge. It seems to have really enjoyed the high polish I put on here. Like, you might be able to see, yeah, you can see how well polished this thing is and how thoroughly polished it is. Like, I like my polished edges, so I polish my edges to a really, really high degree. And you might have noticed how smooth the downward slope the numbers were on the edge wear, and I found that to be a real pleasant surprise. I started falling in love with this about the time we hit the second hour, and we had gone from like 352 to 422. That's some really slow edge wear. That's some really slow, mellow edge wear. A lot of times after an hour, we'll start off at like 120, and then we'll be at like 450 in 1 hour. And then we'll be like 475, 500 at the end of 2 hours. Like, it held on and it wore so smoothly, and it was such an even edge wear. It was such even compared to the first hour, the second hour, the third hour. It was so nice. That 17.5 degrees per side we sharpened at seemed to have been really, really kind to the steel. I haven't quite ever seen steel wear that smoothly on the way down before. The edge retention is very similar to the best D2 we've gotten, with the exception of that Ozark Trail. That thing was an aberration. But it was very similar to the best of the D2 we've gotten, which lines up with the HRC numbers I'd found online. Vosteed apparently is advertising this at 60 to 62 HRC on the Elmax versus 58 to 60 on the D2. So a D2 with a higher HRC is going to come close to this at a lower end HRC for this Elmax. So that seems to have lined up really well with what I was seeing online. But the D2 tends to wear a bit more unevenly and a lot less gracefully than this wore over the course of testing. The same edge on similar blade stock and thickness just feels so much more stable on this Elmax than it does on D2. Now, I had yet again buckled my underwear in anticipation of a long sharpening session that did not materialize. This might be because I've been putting more pressure on the stones and pushing down a good bit harder while I have been sharpening these things. I'm not sure, but, I saw a short by Neebs himself that said, I'm pretty sure it was Neebs, but timidness on your stones is part of what's hurting your sharpening. You can lean on it as hard as you want and reef on it as hard as you can within the confines of your sharpening system. Get those results faster and get better results. So I did that, and it's been working really well. Unlike D2, I got a nice crispy burr on the edge. Like, I could feel it. It was a very distinct burr. D2 does not like giving me a burr, especially on the coarser stones. It just does not like it. I hate that about D2. Like, D2 was my favorite budget steel until I got a bunch of lemons in a row. That's not necessarily D2 itself's fault, but I'm leery of D2 now. Like, I've been burned one time too many. And it could be the Chinese D2. It could be whoever's heat treating these in massive batches. I don't know, but I'm so disappointed in that. But, it was a lot easier to keep my bevel under control on the edge, too. I've got a much nicer, more even, consistent edge on both sides. They match up well enough to make me happy. I really, really did enjoy sharpening this. It was a very, very pleasant experience. And stropping it, it really did respond to the diamond emulsion quite well, and I'll plug that at the end of the video. That's Cutting Lace EDC's diamond emulsion. It did a great job on that, and I did take a lot of extra time sweating the smallest details I could possibly sweat. I'd pull a burr, flip it, pull a burr, flip it, short run to pull another burr, flip it again. I was giving everything 2 runs per side to make sure I got everything as thoroughly as humanly possible. The results kind of speak for themselves, and the thumb studs came off easily enough to make it easier to sharpen the edge without damaging the thumb studs. If there are thumb studs on it, I tend to damage it on accident just because I'll push it a little too far one time and just scrape it, and there's your first ding, and you ain't putting them back to the way they were. The choil right here also made it easy to reach the entire edge, like you might be able to see. Let's see, there we are. We got the edge all the way back there that time, which I am so happy to see that. I haven't been able to get all the way back into something, which was a welcome change of pace. So let's take a look at where our edge is sitting, and of course this notebook paper is significantly harder to get a clean cut on than the printer paper, but it's really hard to make the notebook paper do that. It's really hard to make the notebook paper do that. This is one of the first ones that actually sharpened up well enough to do that. So we'll get the edge sharpness tester out so I can show you how that thing works and how we test it over the course of the night and how this works. And this was kindly provided by you guys. Thank you for that so much. This was also provided by you guys through your super chat donations, channel memberships. I will always be grateful for that. Thank you so much. But this thing gives you a ballpark idea of how sharp it is compared to other edges. And for what we're doing, it's a way to quantify something that's also very hard to quantify. It's not the most accurate thing on the planet, but it does give you a ballpark idea what's happening there for the most part. Some steels, they will read weird, though. I'll tell you that right now. But, it measures the number of grams of force it takes to cut through the wire on this calibrated test clip. And you're only testing an area as wide as this wire is thick, which can skew your numbers a little bit. That's why I do several tests looking for the worst spot I can find. So, stand back, everyone. I'm arming the boy. All right, it's safe now. It's safe. 141. So a 141 is a very good edge as far as this tester reads. 141 is a really good edge. Like you guys saw how it did the notebook paper. So like it sharpened and it took an edge really, really well. I am very happy with the edge this takes. And I'm very happy with how the sharpening went. Like I said, I was able to control the bevel and keep the bevel nice and easy. I pulled a burr on it. Far more pleasant than the reputation would lead you to believe. These super steels are easier to sharpen than people think they are. At least in my experience on fixed angle and freehand. So, one of the last things to point out is the ergos. Oh my god, the ergonomics. Jesus. So this thing came out of the gate rough. Instant hot spots. And the axis lock here did most of that damage. You can see how far the dingusins are sticking out right here. And they're not broken down really well. The edges on this are not chamfered. Ooh, there's that $5 word. But the edges aren't chamfered on this. They're really pokey. And they dug in right here immediately. Like it was bad enough that I had to wait for the hot spots to go numb. So that I was able to go for a few more hours before it started getting really painful. So, of course, I'm holding it like this, and I'm doing my push cuts. This is digging in like let's see. Yeah, like it's digging in right there, and, it dug in right here and right here. Hot spots there. There were hot spots right here. There were hot spots right here on the callus that has developed over a year of doing this. The ergos were kind of rough. Now, the ergos were the only hard kick in the baby batter bags with this thing, and I don't want to blame the ergos entirely because this is a small knife and I have extra large hands, and overall, I'd say the knife as a whole is really good provided, like mini knives, you don't do hours of cutting cardboard without a significant break. As far as I would spring for this if I was looking for a lightweight, compact daily carry because it's really hard to beat this thing. If you catch it on sale somewhere, you can be real confident going for it. Vosteed's been killing it. This is certainly no exception outside of it's not necessarily set up for hands as big as mine. It's gone. The thing's completely gone. Like, a little bit of dingusin hanging out back here, and not much hanging out right here. But you can see, it's gone. Like, I got big old gorilla hands. So, like this is getting long in the tooth, and that's everything I can think of to tell you about this. You know I love sharing with you what happened during Cardboard Slayer, and that's what happened with this thing. So, all that being said, thanks for looking at my crap. Subscribers, you guys are awesome. Y'all keep coming in. I appreciate you so, so much. If you haven't subscribed, please do. We got live streams, regular videos. There's plenty of activities. Channel members, thank you so much. Channel members get to see these videos 24 hours early, so if you want to see them early, jump on that. Comments, I love some feedback. Let me know what you think about this. And now we're going to plug some products from friends of the channel. They're not affiliate links. I don't make any money off it. Just supporting some friends and small businesses. And here you go. And as always, we are going to link up to Cutting Lacey EDC's Diamond Emulsion if you want to step your stropping game up, make it easier to sharpen your blades, and keep them sharp. Wonderful product. I use it myself on every single knife I sharpen now. And we are going to link up to Mad Yocco's wax. If you want to protect your blades that are prone to corrosion, if you want to darken up the color of your micarta, or take care of a million other things, he is going to be on Blade Binge with his wax. Alright, just supporting some friends of the channel and some small businesses. Alright, y'all have a nice day.